introduce the Air Force Honor Guard, who will begin our services. Thank you, gentlemen.
What would be? Naturally.
Ladies and gentlemen, at this time, if you are able to, please rise to playing the tap. For all those who have served or are still serving in the United States military, please render one hand salute. All others may participate by placing their right hand over their heart. Please be seated. Now, on behalf of the President of the United States Air Force, and the grateful nation, please accept this flag as a symbol of our appreciation for your loved one's honorable and faithful service to our country.
Of family, we want to thank the members of the Emperor's Honor Guard for their participation in today's services. I also would like to take this opportunity to introduce Rabbi Goldfarb, who will be officiating services for us. Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you very much. I want to acknowledge and thank Philip Carey, a member of our congregation, who is enabling us to stream our funeral services today to our YouTube channel for those who are unable to be with us. We gather at a very awkward time, having to deal with this pandemic and at the same time, a death of a family member. Judaism teaches us that death is part of the fabric of life. Birth is a beginning and death is a destination. But when that death comes, it tears at that very fabric and leaves us with a wound on our hearts, on our memory. As a symbolic way of demonstrating that wound, ribbons have been pinned to the closest immediate families, understood by Judaism to feel this death more intensely. And I will tear that ribbon as a symbolic way of showing how Joe's death is torn at the fabric of all of your lives. I ask the immediate family members with ribbons to repeat after me. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu Notea B'tochenu Chayev Olam. We praise you, O God, who created us in your image and is implanted within us immortal life. Thank you. We come together this afternoon as a family of mourners to honor the life and the memory of Joe Rofe. We are saddened, deeply saddened, by the death of this devoted husband, dedicated father, grandfather, provider for his family, a man with a strong moral center, who had a passion for justice and fairness. We assemble as a family during these difficult pandemic days, wanting to include friends and extended family to hug and to hold during the time of our sadness. With our modern technology, however, we are at least able to share our ceremony with those who are unable to be with us physically. We raise our voices together in prayer to the source of life, seeking comfort and strength. We need light when gloom darkens our lives. To whom shall we turn, if not to the Creator of light? We need fortitude and courage when pain and loss assail us. Where shall we find them, if not in the thought of the one who preserves all that is good from destruction? O eternal God of life, there are days when our burdens overwhelm us, when our paths are littered with rocks and snags. Although we gather in the full light of day, our world is darkened, as the shadow of death has intruded itself into our lives. Help us, O God, to find light even in these dark moments, and enable us to hear the music of life even as we gather surrounded by the silence of death. Help us to draw comfort and courage from each other and from the memories of the times that we shared with Joe. We listen to words of our tradition, words searching for meaning, words searching for comfort, words reminding us of the blessings of life. Rabbi Alvin Fine wrote, "Birth is a beginning and death a destination, but life is a journey, a going, a growing from stage to stage." Excuse me. I did not have COVID. I have a sinus infection. My test came back negative the other day, so I apologize for sneezing or coughing. It is a going, a growing from stage to stage, from childhood to maturity and youth to age, from innocence to awareness and ignorance to knowing, from foolishness to discretion, and then perhaps to wisdom, from weakness to strength or strength to weakness, and often back again, from health to sickness, and back we pray to health again, from offense to forgiveness, from loneliness to love, from joy to gratitude, from pain to compassion, and grief to understanding, from fear to faith, from defeat to defeat to defeat, until looking backward or ahead, we see that victory lies not at some high place along the way, but rather in having made the journey stage by stage, a sacred pilgrimage. Birth is a beginning, and death a destination, but life is a journey, a sacred pilgrimage made stage by stage, from birth to death to life everlasting. But perhaps the wisest of all words that capture the irrevocable rhythms and patterns of our mortal lives are the words of Kohelet, excuse me, of Ecclesiastes. For everything there is a season, a time for every experience under heaven, a time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to uproot what is planted, a time to tear down and a time to build up, a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to grieve and a time to dance, a time to throw stones and a time to gather stones, a time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing, a time to seek, a time to lose, a time to keep and a time to discard, a time to tear and a time to sow, a time to keep silence and a time to speak. L'chol zman v'et, l'chol chafetz tachat hashamayim. For everything there is a season, a time for every experience under heaven. And this is a time of remembering. For it is through remembering that we show gratitude for a life that has been but loaned to us. And so let us apply the healing ointment of memory to our broken hearts. I did not have the opportunity to get to know Joe very well during my brief time with Temple Beth Or. I'm grateful to members of his family who shared their insights and reflections, and from whom we will hear as part of our ceremony. Joe was born 17 years ago to Leon and Louise Rofe in Los Angeles. Joe was one of 4 children born to the Rofes. He's preceded in a death by his parents and his younger brother Jack, and survived by his twin brother Albert and sister Sarah. And Albert, our hearts go out to you at the immediacy of the loss of your twin. And Sarah, who is unable to be with us, our hearts extend to her as well. There are so many events that happened during Joe's life that are part of our common historical experience. The year that Joe was born was the same year that welcomed penicillin to help cure disease, and when the slinky was invented, and the silly putty was invented, and when Jacques Cousteau invented the aqualung, what would later become scuba. Joe was 1 year old when FDR was elected to his 4th term as president. He was 2 years old when World War II came to an end. 4 years old when the world was introduced to instant Polaroid pictures. Explain that one to Joe's grandchildren. The way we used to have to, the thing would come out. Remember, you'd have to peel the thing off and wait for the picture to develop. Yeah. It still works that way if you can find the film. Yep. He was 4 years old when the Dead Sea Scrolls were discovered. Joe was 5 years old when the jukebox was invented, Frisbee, Velcro, and when Israel became a modern state, and this is only the very beginning of his life. We have yet to get to space travel, landing on the moon, the internet, our cell phones, all the technology we use today. Joe grew up in Southern California and South Central Los Angeles, I learned. Went to school and would go on to serve our nation in the U.S. Air Force, as you saw, with the Honor Guard. He served our nation proudly in one of our more difficult of wars during the Vietnam War. Joe would meet and soon marry Star. Together they would dance in each other's circle to the music of life for 50 years. Just 50 years, right? Their 50th anniversary, just this past August. And would add to their family tree 2 sons, Leon and Scott. Lauren, I'm sorry, yes, it is Lauren. I just need to learn to read. Lauren and Scott. A family tree that with Kelly has grown to include 4 grandchildren. Logan, who is also acting as our cameraman for the day. Sydney, Peyton, and Courtney. And it's to the family members that I now turn. Instead of sharing echoes of their memories and their experience as the man that you know so well, I invite Sydney, Joe's granddaughter, to share a few words. And if you'd like, Logan, I'll take over for that. Thank you.
Thank you all for coming out today to honor this great man.
It's okay. Take a deep breath. Lauren, if you want to stand next to her, go ahead.
I would like to start off by saying there was nobody like my grandmother. He was so supportive in everything my siblings and I did. Every baseball game, every soccer game, and every Sunday dance recital. He was there cheering us on. One thing that I remember is that every time my sisters and I finished one of our 3 shows of the day, he and my grandmother would come over and tell us how amazing we were. They would have flowers, and a cute stuffed animal for each of us. And we would just be cracking each other up. He always knew the right thing to say to us at the perfect time. He was hilarious. And whenever we were sad, all he had to do was say one thing to make us smile. One of my favorite memories with him was every time we went over to his house. My grandfather and my grandmother would have this one picture on their fridge. It was of my twin sister Peyton and I as babies, and these little cribs with our giant red afros. He would always say, "That is my favorite picture of you." If we were ever scared to do something, he would do it with us and then laugh as we did it over and over again. He was a very active person. One of his favorite things to do would be to wake up at 2 in the morning and go for a 5-mile walk. There was not a day that went by that he did not complete his miles. He always had to be busy with his job or family or just physical activity. He was so dedicated to the things he loved and cared about. And there are so many people here today who would not be here without him. My grandfather was brave, considerate, humorous, gentle but strong, and hardworking. There are so many more words to describe this fantastic human being. I really wish he was here with us, but I know he is looking out at us today, smiling. Please always remember that I love you, Grandpa. Thank you.
Lauren, yes, I would invite you up, but you're there. Well done, Sydney. Words that come from the heart often come with tears. Thank you for speaking so honestly and lovingly about your grandfather.
Now we'll see if I can get through mine.
Can you slide over one?
Thank you, everyone, for being here today. I also want to thank those who couldn't make it but are able to watch via the live stream. Today is the day I've dreaded. Losing a father is difficult enough, but when he is your friend, your role model, and the person you respect, it makes it almost unbearable. I know everyone here knows my dad pretty well, but I wanted to take this time to share some of my memories with him, with everybody. I remember as a young kid, my family, along with my Uncle Al, my Uncle Jack's families, always got together. We had family barbecues. My dad was amazing on the grill. And holiday outings together. And it just always felt like our families were always together. As a kid, I always wanted to listen to what my dad and uncles were discussing, which wasn't hard because, as you probably all know, Rofe men aren't known for their soft, quiet voices. They discussed many different topics, but since all three work for the Postal Service, you can imagine what the majority of the conversations were about. I always wondered how three men could spend over half their lives working for a place they seem to complain about so often. My dad would complain about the injustices and things he believed the post office was doing wrong, but would still defend it when outsiders complained about it. I think deep down he had great respect for his job and what it meant to people. Another childhood memory that always came to mind was when just my dad and I would drive into Los Angeles together. We would stop by my Uncle Herb's dry cleaners and then visit my Uncle Jack at his house. Along the drive, he would talk to me, imparting his wisdom, which he liked to call little life lessons. The rest of the time, he would play Neil Diamond on 8-track. I'll explain to my kids later what that is. We made that trip many a Saturday, and looking back, it was so special because it was our time. To this day, I still have almost every Neil Diamond song memorized. He never stopped teaching me his life lessons. Sometimes he was direct, and sometimes they were hidden in a story. First and foremost, he always told me work hard and don't stop until you've achieved your goals. He always said nobody was going to give you anything for free in this life, so you better work hard for what you want. This was drilled into my brother and I know my dad is the reason we work so hard to this day. Talking about work ethic, even when my dad retired, he didn't retire. Immediately after leaving the Postal Service, he got another job. He worked part-time as a courier transporting medical lab samples. I think he enjoyed staying busy since he didn't have a lot of hobbies. He was not one of those crazy sports dads, but he did love to read. He read the newspaper every day, probably one of those few people left on the planet who still read an actual paper. He also constantly read books. His other great passion was walking. Come rain or shine, he walked every day as if he was on a mission. My dad was also one of those dads who loved to tease and tell horrible dad jokes. Anyone who's been to a restaurant with my dad knows exactly what I'm talking about. One of my dad's favorite expressions to use was bobo, which was usually reserved for my brother and me when we were kids. For those of you who don't know the term bobo, it is for a person who is acting like a fool. However, my friends didn't know what a bobo was, so he would either call them turkeys or say, you yahoos. Something as we got older we used to laugh at. My dad also taught me that when you do a job, you always do your best, even if you don't like it, and you do it right the first time. Along with that was when you purchase something or when something needs to be repaired, don't buy something inferior to save a few bucks. Better to pay more up front and buy quality that lasts. My dad was also a huge believer in justice and fair play. He hated to see or hear about people who worked hard and did the right thing still lose, while others cheated their way to success. However, that sense of fair play went out the window when I played him in basketball, or as he liked to call it, gorilla ball. The man didn't know a foul he didn't like. I tried to explain to him he wasn't allowed to throw a 10-year-old to the ground to make a basket, but that didn't stop him. I found it odd, though, that once I turned 15, he didn't want to play anymore. My dad was also one who enjoyed a really good meal. I remember anytime he and my mom went out with friends or family to a fancy dinner, or they took a vacation, he would describe the meal in detail. In fact, for my parents' 35th wedding anniversary, they went on a cruise with some friends that took them all over Europe and Russia. When they got back, my mom showed us pictures and told us all about the sights. My dad, on the other hand, spent an hour telling me about all the different meals they had. He left no detail out, from how thick his steak was to the decadent desserts to how he couldn't believe the price of a 6-ounce Coke in London. Even though he never said it, I think why my father focused on food was because for him, food brought people together. It's funny, my dad wasn't fond of long speeches and didn't like to give speeches at all. He refused to speak at most engagements. He would probably be telling me to shorten this one, even though it's about him. In fact, in my 48 years, I only heard him give one speech, which was during my wedding rehearsal dinner. I know it was difficult for him, but it meant a lot to me. Of course, I think it was less about his son getting married and more because he was excited that he was finally getting the daughter he always wanted. As I mentioned before, my dad didn't have a lot of hobbies. That all changed when he became a grandparent. He was a little standoffish at first. I couldn't figure out why. I remember talking to my Uncle Hal. And he told me to put my son directly in my dad's arms. I realized after that conversation, my dad was nervous. I did just what my uncle suggested, and that's all it took. My dad became one of those doting grandfathers you see in all the Hallmark movies. He could not get enough of his grandkids. For a man who was never a big sports guy, he never missed one of his grandkids' games or song and dance performances. As everyone here knows, Rofe men also are a bit stubborn. My dad was no different when it came to watching his grandkids play sports or perform. I distinctly remember on one occasion, my daughters each had a soccer game, and then my son had to play 3 games with a 2-hour break in between. It basically meant being at the sports field from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. straight. My mom knew she could never last that long for all those games. My dad immediately told her if she wasn't up to it, stay home because he wasn't leaving. I really saw my dad's affectionate side come out with his grandkids. I remember one time my kids were all misbehaving and I got upset with them. And my dad looks right at me and says, "Why are you getting upset? Nothing is worth getting mad at them over." My jaw dropped when I heard that because I sure didn't remember him practicing that philosophy when I was a kid. Lastly, my dad and mom shared their 50th wedding anniversary this past August. We were all set to go on a Caribbean cruise together, but it was canceled due to the coronavirus. We were then all going to have a fancy dinner, at least celebrate the anniversary that way. Once again, canceled due to the virus. Due to the virus, we didn't get to see my parents for several months. Since March, we only got to see them one time, for my son's 16th birthday, when my dad said he didn't care about the rules. There was no way he was missing his grandson's birthday. I think that's been the hardest part about this. All the time we lost due to the pandemic. Other than my son's birthday, I didn't get to see him until he had his first stroke. And even then, when I visited him, his first question to me was about his grandkids. Well, this part's hard. I know he will always be watching over them every time. Every time Logan makes a great play at home plate, Sidney makes a diving save in the goal. Ian jukes out opponents and makes an amazing shot. And Kearney blows the crowd away singing and dancing. I know he'll be up there watching, bragging to everyone about his grandkids. Probably upsetting some people. I know I've spoken longer than my dad would have wanted, as everyone here knows he was never much for a lot of fanfare. But to quote one of his sayings, for things outside of his control, what you gonna do? With that, I say, Dad, I love you, I miss you, and until we meet again.
Sorry. You okay? All right. Thanks, Logan. Wonderful. Lauren, thank you as well. You and Sydney did such a wonderful job of carrying forward not only your love, but the lessons you learned from Joe, how he lived his life. All that spoke very highly amidst the tears and the crying. Lauren, you mentioned it being, one of the hallmarks of your father, which brought to mind the comment you shared about his love of Hallmark movies and how he would go and binge watch even Hallmark movies. It seems to me that those movies capture a common theme about Joe's life, and that is family and connection to others, and the importance of being kind and of being just to others. Those are some of those themes that come out of those movies, where there is a challenge and a resolution. May you all find comfort and strength from all who gather by your sides. And may you be comforted in the knowledge that Joe rests in eternal peace. In Olam Haba, the world to come, Joe has been gathered to his kin. Although Joe is no longer physically with us, he will always be a part of us and a part of you, through the good deeds that he performed and the many ways in which he touched your lives. We remember, we reflect, and we cherish the life of Joe Rofe. In the rising of the sun and in its going down, we will remember Joe. In the blowing of the wind and in the chill of winter, we will remember him. In the opening of buds and in the rebirth of spring, we will remember. In the blueness of the sky and in the warmth of summer, we will remember Joe. In the rustling of leaves and in the beauty of autumn, we will remember Joe. In the beginning of the year, and when it ends, we will remember him. When we are weary and in need of strength, we will remember Joe. And when we are lost and sick at heart, we will remember him. When we have joys we yearn to share, we will remember Joe. So long as you live, so too shall Joe live, for he is now a part of you. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, noteah betochenu chayei olam. We praise you, our eternal God, sovereign of the universe, who forms us in the divine image, who nourishes and sustains us, and who implants immortal life within us. And let us all say, Amen. Merit Malloy wrote, "When I die, give what's left of me away to children and to old men that wait to die. And if you need to cry, cry for your brother walking the street beside you. And when you need me, put your arms around anyone and give them what you need to give me. I want to leave you something better than words, better than sounds. Look for me. Look for me in the people I've known and the people I've loved. And if you cannot give me away, at least let me live in your eyes and not in your mind. You can love me most by letting hands touch hands, by letting bodies touch bodies, and by letting go of children that need to be free. Love doesn't die, people do. So when all that's left of me is love, give me away. There are two traditional prayers we share at our funeral service. The first prayer speaks of God as a compassionate being, El Malei Rachamim, a God full of compassion. And yet it is a prayer that we recite at one of the most difficult times in our lives, at funeral services, at memorial services. But within this linking of that prayer to these very powerful emotions comes an important lesson about life and living. The opposite of love is not hate. Ask any child, spouse, parent, partner. The opposite of love is apathy. And where there's apathy, there is no grief. There's no pain, there's no loss. Neither is there any laughter or joy or love. We have been blessed to live in a world that is filled with love. And thus we live with very powerful emotions at the time when a loved one of ours dies. And yet it is that very love that can help us transcend the distance we feel from Joe and from all of our departed. As a tribute to Joe's memory and to all that he brought to your world and to your lives, I ask that we rise as we are able, to stand as we are able for this prayer. El Malei Rachamim Shofein Bamromim Amtze Menucha Nechona Tachat Kanfei Hashchina B'ma'alot Kedoshim U'Toharim Kezohar Haraki Amazirim Et Nishmat Yosef Yadidenu V'Yekirenu Shalach Le'olamo Began Eden Tehi Menuchato Ana Ba'al Harachamim Yasti Rehu Beseter Kenafecha Le'olamim Utzor B'Tzor HaChaim Et Nishmato Adonai Hu Nachalato V'Yanuach B'Shalom Al Mishkavo V'Nomar Amen. Compassionate God, Eternal Spirit of the universe, grant perfect rest in your sheltering presence to our beloved Joe Rofe, who has entered eternity. O God of mercy, let him find refuge in your eternal presence, and there in the shadow of your wings, let his soul be bound up in the bond of everlasting life. God is his inheritance. May Joe rest in peace, and let us say, Amen. We may be seated. Judaism teaches us that nothing is hidden from our sight. We share intimately in bringing our loved ones to their eternal resting place. We do so not as strangers, but as a family. And so we will witness the lowering of the casket. Following that, we will recite the Kaddish, and then we will invite family members and friends to shovel in some shovelfuls of dirt. Sure, can we hold it just for a moment? Sorry, Logan, once again. Each of us has a name given by the source of life and given by our parents. Each of us has a name given by our stature, our smile, and given by what we wear. Each of us has a name given by the mountains and given by our walls. Each of us has a name given by the stars and given by our neighbors. Each of us has a name given by our sins and given by our longing. Each of us has a name given by our enemies and given by our love. Each of us has a name given by our celebrations and given by our work. Joe was known by many names. He was son and brother. He was husband, father, grandfather. He was postal employee. He was teaser. He was all of those things. And all of those names capture a facet of the gem of the man that was Joe, a gem that has been entrusted to your hearts and to your memories. We say shalom and not goodbye. For shalom is goodbye and hello and wholeness and peace all threaded together in one breath. And in one breath we too say goodbye to a hand to hold, a kiss, a tight embrace. And in the same breath of shalom we say hello to an ocean of memories and a rush of emotion, gratitude and sorrow, tears and laughter, trembling and fatigue, all in one breath. The dust returns to the earth as it was. The spirit returns to God who gave it. It is only the house of the soul which we lay within the earth. The soul itself does not die. Oh God, help us to understand that grief and love go hand in hand, and that the pain which loss inflicts is a measure of a love that is stronger than death. All things pass. All that lives will die. All that we prize is but lent to us. And the time comes when we must surrender it. We are travelers on the same road that leads to the same end. And in this spirit, O God, do we commit all that is precious to us, to your keeping, as we share the words hallowed by the generations, the words of our Kaddish, found on page 8 and page 9 in the memorial booklets. The Kaddish is a prayer that never mentions the word death or grief. It is a prayer that originates with our rabbis at the conclusion of something. It begins as a prayer recited at the conclusion of a period of study, a book of the Bible, a tractate of the Talmud. The rabbis gathered together, and as they were about to set off on their journey, not knowing when their paths would cross again or under what conditions, they simply wished to acknowledge the great mystery of life, that there is a power beyond us, that there is a creator, and that we as human beings our paths of life will intertwine with those just at the right time. What begins as a prayer at the conclusion of a period of study becomes a prayer at the conclusion of one's life. Likewise, your paths, your life paths, have all crossed with Joe. We marvel at all the intricacies of the web of life that enabled Joe's life to exist and your lives to exist. And in Joe's presence, like our rabbis, you learned, you laughed, you lived, and you loved. And at the heart of it all is still a mystery about how it all came to be and how we came to be at the right time to meet and encounter Joe. Again, as a tribute to his memory and to all that he brought to your lives, I invite you to rise as you are able as we share this Kaddish for Joe. Yitkadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabbah, v'yalva divrach hirutei v'yamlich malchutei, v'chayechon v'yom echon uv'chayei dechol Beit Yisrael, v'agala uv'izman kariv v'imru amen. Yehei shemei Rabbah mevarach le'olam u'lalmei almaya, yitbarach v'yishtabach, v'yitba'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh, V'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal Shemei d'Kudusha b'richu Le'elam in kol birchata v'shirata, tushbechata v'nechamata, da'amiran ve'alma v'imru amen. Yehi shlama rabba min shmaya, v'chayim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael, v'imru amen. Oseh shalom b'mromav, hu ya'aseh shalom, aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael, v'imru amen. May all of us who mourn, and all of us who are bereaved, may we find strength and courage from those who gather by our sides. And may we find through God's eternal presence a source of comfort, wholeness, and shalom, peace. And let us all say, Amen. At this time, I invite those who would like to shovel in some shovelfuls of dirt. Logan, I'll take the camera from you. Please be careful around the gravesite. The psalmist wrote, Lech Lechayim, Lech Shalom. We came here today with a difficult task, to bring Joe to this sacred and hallowed grounds. Having done so, Lech Lechayim, Lech Shalom. Go forth to life, go forth to peace. We bind up the wounds of the living, whereas normally we might gather for food and continued talk and memories. Our pandemic days have restricted some of that behavior as well. And so find ways to continue to tell Joe's story with each other, on the internet, through phones and through text. Call to mind those memories. They give you strength and courage for the coming days. Lecha Chaim, Lecha Shalom.
Once again, on behalf of the family, we wish to thank Rabbi Goldfarb for officiating services here at Graveside, the kindness of our pallbearers for their assistance, and for the many acts of kindness you've all shown the family. Thank you. This